Inside the life of the greatest showman Donald Trump. In the grand theater of American life, there are actors who play their parts. There are stars who command the spotlight. And then, there are the rare, elemental forces of nature. These are the figures so colossal, so audacious, that they don't merely take the stage. They tear down the existing theater and rebuild it from the ground up, entirely in their own image, for the better part of the last half-century. One man has embodied that role with more skill and spectacle than anyone else. He is a walking, talking, living performance. Peerless master of self-promotion who so expertly blurred the lines between business, entertainment, and raw power that the distinctions became meaningless. You simply couldn't tell where one began and the other ended. With relentless ambition, he transformed a family real estate empire into a globally recognized brand, spun a reality television show into a formidable political movement, and turned his own name into a complete ideology. This is the incredible story of an empire constructed on a foundation of pure spectacle, a savant-like understanding of media, and the unshakable core belief that no matter what happens, the show must always go on. So, how did it happen? How did a real estate developer from the outer boroughs of New York City, the ambitious son of a successful but relatively quiet builder, manage to transform himself into one of the greatest and most polarizing showmen the world has ever witnessed? How did he systematically conquer the iconic New York skyline, then the television screens in every American living room, and finally the global political stage, all while using the exact same playbook of big-time branding, overwhelming spectacle, and total, uncompromising media command? This isn't just the story of the buildings he built or the deals he made. This is the story of how Donald Trump built his most enduring and powerful product, Donald Trump. Our story doesn't begin in a glittering Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, but in the grit and concrete of Queens, New York. It was here, far from the limelight, that a young Donald Trump absorbed the most crucial lessons of his life from his father, Fred Trump. Fred was a formidable builder in his own right, a no-nonsense, pragmatic man who constructed sturdy, affordable, middle-class housing all across Brooklyn and Queens. He was famously, almost obsessively frugal, a man known for making his construction crews stoop down and pick up stray nails from the dirt so they could be hammered into another wall. But he also instilled something far bigger in his son, the core principle that in real estate, you don't just build buildings, you build leverage. Fred Trump was a master at working the system, skillfully using government programs and cultivating political connections to finance his projects. He was fiercely, relentlessly ambitious, and he relentlessly pushed his son Donald to be a killer, to be a king. But while Fred was content to be the undisputed king of Queens, Donald had his eyes fixed on a much larger, more glamorous kingdom, the island of Manhattan. He officially joined the family business in 1971, and his first move was to rebrand it entirely. The humble, functional Elizabeth Trump and Son was retired, replaced by the much punchier, more powerful Trump Organization. He understood a fundamental truth that his father never quite grasped. A name, if you build it correctly, could become an asset more valuable than all the bricks and mortar in the world. He had no interest in building simple apartments. He was driven by a burning desire to erect towering monuments to himself. His first major gambit was the Commodore Hotel, a once beautiful but now decaying old building languishing right next to the critical artery of Grand Central Terminal. The year was 1974, and New York City was a portrait of urban decay, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. While nearly everyone else saw a city in irreversible ruin, Trump smelled a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He looked at a grimy, soot-stained facade and envisioned a sleek, modern palace of reflective glass. Through sheer force of will and dazzling salesmanship, he pieced together a massively complex deal. He persuaded a desperate city to grant him an unprecedented 40-year tax break. He brought in the Hyatt Corporation as a partner to lend credibility, and he convinced the skeptical banks to loan him the rest. It was a masterclass in persuasion. He wasn't just selling a hotel renovation, he was selling a grand, optimistic vision of a new, revitalized New York, with himself standing squarely at the center of the rebirth. When the glistening Grand Hyatt Hotel finally opened its doors in 1980. It was an immediate and undeniable success. Donald Trump had officially arrived. The Grand Hyatt, however, was just the opening act. The main event was yet to come. Ever since he was a boy, Trump had harbored the dream of building a signature tower on Fifth Avenue, the most famous and prestigious street on the planet. He soon zeroed in on the perfect location: the Bonwit Teller Building, an Art Deco landmark of historical significance, conveniently located right next to the iconic Tiffany & Co. To build his own monument, he would first have to tear another one down. In a move that would become a signature pattern of behavior, he publicly promised the historic, sculpted reliefs on the building's facade to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, earning praise for his civic-mindedness. Then, when the time came, he had them unceremoniously jackhammered into dust, callously claiming it was too expensive and structurally difficult to save them. It was a template for action we would see repeated for decades. Make a grand promise, do whatever is most expedient, and then simply ride out the wave of public anger with defiant bluster. What rose from the rubble was not merely a building, it was a full-blown Broadway production cast in bronze and glass. Trump Tower opened in 1983, and its 58-story, jagged bronze glass design was a deliberate middle finger to the quiet, understated limestone elegance of its neighbors. Inside, the public atrium was a spectacle of opulence, dripping with 240 tons of gleaming pink marble and anchored by a dramatic 60-foot waterfall. It was all meticulously designed to be overwhelming, a sensory assault of luxury. This wasn't just another office tower, it was conceived as a destination, a must-see tourist attraction. In a classic showman's maneuver, Trump even manipulated the floor numbers. He labeled the top residential floor as 68 instead of the actual 58, audaciously arguing that the soaring height of the public atrium below counted for 10 extra floors, a small, brazen fib that added millions in phantom value to the brand. He masterfully exploited the city's complex zoning laws, purchasing the air rights from the neighboring Tiffany's building. This brilliant legal maneuver allowed him to build his tower 20 stories higher than regulations otherwise permitted. It was an ingenious move that demonstrated his understanding of how to turn invisible space into millions of tangible dollars. Trump Tower wasn't just a home for the ultra-rich, it was the new headquarters of his entire operation and, more importantly, the physical embodiment of the Trump brand itself. Loud, unapologetically luxurious, and drenched in gold, the apartments sold out in months, cementing his reputation as the city's preeminent luxury developer. With Trump Tower as a smash hit, the 1980s became Trump's decade. His name was inescapable. He lived and breathed in the pages of the New York tabloids, which were infatuated with his larger-than-life personality and his tumultuous personal life. He instinctively understood that media attention was a form of currency, and he spent it with abandon. He carefully cultivated this image of a brash, unstoppable, deal-making genius, an image he essentially codified in his 1987 bestseller, *The Art of the Deal*. The book became a veritable Bible for a generation of aspiring entrepreneurs, preaching a gospel of thinking big, using leverage to its absolute maximum, and never, ever backing down. Feeling utterly untouchable, he expanded his empire into a new, even flashier arena: the casinos of Atlantic City. If Manhattan was about building prestige, Atlantic City was about pure, unadulterated glitz. He opened Trump Plaza in 1984, followed by Trump's Castle just a year later. But his intended masterpiece, the crown jewel of his coastal empire, was supposed to be the Trump Taj Mahal, which he opened in 1990 after a bitter and public battle with television host Merv Griffin. He brazenly called it the eighth wonder of the world. It was a billion-dollar monument to sheer excess, the biggest and most lavish casino in the world. For a fleeting moment, Trump was the undisputed king of the boardwalk, single-handedly controlling about 30% of Atlantic City's entire casino revenue. He bought an airline, a massive yacht he renamed the Trump Princess, and sponsored huge, high-profile boxing matches. Everything he touched was designed to scream success at maximum volume. But beneath the gold-plated facade, the entire empire was dangerously over-leveraged, built on a precarious mountain of debt. The Taj Mahal, for all its dazzling glitter, was financed with high-yield junk bonds that carried insane, crippling interest rates. Just 1 year after its grand opening, the Taj filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the first of many such collapses. His other casinos weren't far behind. For any other businessman, this string of failures would have been a career-ending catastrophe. But for Donald Trump, it was just another story to be spun. He brilliantly and shamelessly reframed corporate bankruptcy not as a personal failure, but as a savvy and clever business move. He openly bragged about using the laws of the country to his strategic advantage, masterfully pushing his own massive debts onto the company and leaving the banks, bondholders, and investors holding the bag. Even as his companies were going under, he was personally extracting millions of dollars in salary and bonuses. He had learned the single most important lesson of his career: if you control the narrative, you control reality. You can fail upwards, so long as you never, ever admit you lost. The 1990s became a period of strategic rebuilding for Trump, not with bricks and mortar, but with the careful curation of his public image. While his casino empire was a tangled mess of bankruptcies and lawsuits, his celebrity brand was, paradoxically, stronger than ever. He expertly kept himself in the public eye, making memorable cameo appearances in movies like Home Alone 2 and popping up on popular television shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Sex and the City. He became a regular and highly sought-after guest on talk shows, especially Howard Stern's radio show, where his unfiltered, often wild and controversial comments generated headlines and kept people talking. He was rapidly learning that a television camera could be a much more powerful and efficient tool than a bulldozer. You could build a brand on TV much faster and with significantly less financial risk than you could build a skyscraper on Fifth Avenue. This period of media immersion led directly to the single most transformative move of his entire career, the one that would catapult him from a well-known New York character to a national and even global icon. In 2004, he partnered with acclaimed reality TV producer Mark Burnett to create a new show called The Apprentice. The concept was pure, unadulterated genius. It presented itself as a 15-week, high-stakes job interview where ambitious contestants fought tooth and nail for a coveted six-figure salary working directly for him. But the real product being sold wasn't the job, it was the carefully constructed character of Donald Trump. The show presented a perfectly packaged version of his public persona. He was America's boss, a tough, decisive, no-nonsense leader sitting in a golden boardroom, passing down judgment from on high. Producers were masters of the craft, skillfully editing hours of footage to make his decisions seem brilliant, his comebacks witty, and his business instincts utterly flawless. The show's dramatic climax, his iconic catchphrase, "You're fired," became a cultural phenomenon. It was simple, brutal, and decisively final, exactly what the larger-than-life character of Donald Trump was supposed to be. The Apprentice was a ratings monster. It didn't just rescue his public image from the ashes of Atlantic City, it completely redefined it for a new and much larger generation that knew nothing of his financial train wrecks in the 90s. To this massive television audience, he wasn't a guy who repeatedly flirted with financial ruin. He was the ultimate, unquestionable symbol of success. The show was a powerful myth-making machine, working week after week to solidify this new identity. This constant, positive exposure created what media researchers call a parasocial bond with millions of viewers, a powerful, one-sided relationship, where people in the audience feel as if they actually know, understand, and trust a media personality. Week after week, millions of Americans invited this character into their living rooms. They saw a powerful, decisive leader, and they grew to trust his judgment. This connection proved to be incredibly deep and politically potent. Academic studies conducted years later have demonstrated a direct correlation. The more people watched The Apprentice, the more likely they were to support him and vote for him in the 2016 Republican primary. Show was methodically laying the political groundwork for his political career, long before anyone, perhaps even Trump himself, fully realized it. The financial windfall from the show was staggering. Trump himself reportedly earned as much as $427 million from The Apprentice its spin-offs, and the vast constellation of licensing deals that came with his newfound level of fame. His name, now more famous than ever before, was slapped on an ever-expanding array of products: Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump the Game, and even the infamous Trump University. In reality, a great number of these business ventures were spectacular flops. Trump Vodka was discontinued in just a few years. Trump Mortgage, which he launched in 2006 with the boast that it was a great time to get into the housing market, folded in less than 2 years. And Trump University, which was not a real university and offered no accredited degrees, led to a massive fraud lawsuit from the New York Attorney General for making false promises to its students, a case that was eventually settled for $25 million. But in a strange and telling way, the individual failures of these products hardly mattered. The point was never to build lasting, sustainable companies. It was to keep the image of an ever-expanding, ever-successful empire alive in the public consciousness. Success was measured by visibility. Every new product, whether it was a hit or a miss, served to stamp the Trump name deeper into the public mind. He had perfected the art of cashing in on fame itself. The television show gave perceived value to his products, and the products, in turn, reinforced his celebrity. It was a perfect, self-sustaining loop. He had moved beyond the tangible world of real estate and into the much more profitable, much more powerful world of pure branding. Donald Trump was no longer just a man. He had become a trademark. The stage was now set for his most unbelievable and consequential act yet. For years, Donald Trump had flirted with the idea of running for president. He teased a potential run as far back as 1987 and even launched a brief, exploratory campaign for the Reform Party's nomination in 1999. For the most part, political pundits and the media wrote it off as just another publicity stunt, the showman finding a way to keep his name in the papers and his brand in the spotlight. But after the wild, runaway success of The Apprentice something fundamental had changed. A line between his tough-talking TV character and a viable political candidate began to get dangerously blurry, both for him and for the public. His official, sustained entry into the political arena was, fittingly, a media circus from the very beginning. He became the most prominent and loudest voice of the birther movement, a baseless conspiracy theory that falsely and maliciously claimed that President Barack Obama was not born in the United States. It was a classic Trump maneuver: create a raging firestorm, dominate the news cycle for weeks on end, and position yourself as a brave outsider telling a forbidden truth that the establishment wants to suppress. It didn't matter in the slightest that the claims were completely and demonstrably false. All that mattered was the all-consuming attention. He was using the media's own dynamics to create a potent political narrative, just as he had always done in business. Then, on June 16, 2015, the show truly began. In a scene that looked as if it were produced for reality television, Donald Trump descended the golden escalator of Trump Tower to formally announce that he was running for president of the United States. The moment was pure, unadulterated political theater. His speech was a wild, rambling, and electrifying performance that swung erratically from bold promises about national greatness to shocking and inflammatory insults. He wasn't some polished, focus-grouped politician carefully reading from a teleprompter. He was a reality TV star, unpredictable, seemingly unscripted, and perfectly suited for a 24/7 news cycle that was starving for compelling content. His campaign was nothing short of a masterclass in media hacking. He spent barely any money on traditional television ads in the primary because he didn't have to. He generated an estimated $2 billion in free media coverage simply by being relentlessly, strategically outrageous. He understood instinctively that in the modern media landscape, controversy is cash and conflict is king. His rallies quickly became the main event of the election. They weren't your typical state political speeches. They were full-blown spectacles, complete with loud rock music, passionate chanting crowds, and the iconic red "Make America Great Again" hats, a piece of political branding so simple and perfect that it became a powerful cultural symbol overnight. At these rallies, Trump was the unquestioned headliner. He was an entertainer, stand-up comedian, and a fiery preacher all rolled into one, feeding off the crowd's energy, expertly mixing grievances and resentments with crude jokes and declarations of bravado. He would say one shocking thing after another, virtually guaranteeing that he would be the lead story on the nightly news and the main topic of conversation on the morning shows, while his more conventional opponents were giving boring, detailed policy speeches. Trump was creating moments. He understood that cable news needs drama, conflict, and compelling characters, and he gave it to them in an endless, firehose supply. He also fundamentally changed the game on social media. His Twitter account became his personal megaphone, a revolutionary tool that allowed him to speak directly to tens of millions of followers without having to go through the filter of the fake news media he so despised. The tweets were often angry, frequently riddled with falsehoods, and usually sent out in the early hours of the morning, but they always worked. They set the entire news agenda for the day, forcing every other candidate and the media itself to play defense and react to him. He was the executive producer, head writer, and undisputed star of his own 24-hour news channel. The political experts, the pollsters, and the pundits all thought his campaign was a joke, a garish sideshow that was destined to burn out any day. They simply didn't get it. Trump wasn't playing their game of politics. He was playing the game he had spent 40 years perfecting. He was selling a brand, a potent vision of strength, nationalism, and success, with himself cast as the strongman hero who could fix everything. His supporters weren't just voters, they were fans, the very same audience that had watched him, admired him, and trusted him on the Apprentice for years. They trusted the character he played on TV, and they believed he could play it in the White House. In November 2016, the showman pulled off his greatest and most improbable stunt, defying all the polls and shocking the world. Donald Trump was elected the 45th President of the United States. His presidency was simply a continuation of the campaign, the ultimate reality show, broadcast from the Oval Office, with new, dramatic plot twists every single day, often kicked off by a single, impulsive tweet. He continued to hold his signature rallies, and he kept his war with the media at a fever pitch, knowing that the ongoing conflict itself was what kept his base energized and loyal. 8 years later, in a stunning political comeback that defied historical precedent, he did it again, winning the 2024 election to become the 47th president. The show wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning its second season. The story of how media, spectacle, and celebrity can fundamentally shape our reality is more urgent and important now than ever before. If you want to keep digging into the people, forces, and ideas that define our turbulent times, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. From the outer boroughs of New York City to the golden boardroom of the Apprentice and then, incredibly, to the Oval Office twice. Donald Trump's story is unlike any other in modern history. It is the definitive story of a man who figured out, earlier and more profoundly than almost anyone, that in a world drowning in media, the perception of a thing is the thing itself. He was never just selling real estate, or a TV show, or a political platform. He was always, from the very beginning, selling himself. His entire career has been one long, continuous performance, with each stage grander and more audacious than the one before. He built a towering empire of glass and gold, but his true, lasting genius was in building an empire of the intangible, an image, a brand, a myth, that millions of people around the world bought into completely. The ultimate legacy of Donald Trump, the greatest showman of our age, isn't just in the buildings he put up or the policies he passed. It is in how he conclusively proved the raw, world-altering power of spectacle, forever changing the rules of the game for anyone who dares to seek fame, fortune, or power.